Here's something that happens to us frequently as illustrators. We get into a project, everything is going absolutely great, everybody's happy, and all of a sudden the client comes up with a new idea, a different way of doing things, something that is additional and something that is outside of the scope of work that we originally estimated. In other words, it's going to take us more time to do it. So what do we do about this? Do we charge for it? How much do we charge for it? How do we ask to charge for it? That's what this video is all about, answering that question with solutions that I've come up with over the years that have worked incredibly well. Welcome to my channel on illustration. My name is Richard. I've been an illustrator for a number of decades, and I think it's been a brilliant and very successful career. I've totally loved it. This series is all about transferring to you the knowledge that I've accumulated, what I've gotten to work, how to increase your work, how to work with better clients, how to reduce stress with clients, how to monetize your talents. In order to answer this question, I'm going to do a brief story time. When I started out, I was doing something that I would call illustrations that were used to market real estate. I was working for a large advertising agency in Washington, D.C. They were basically sending me all their work, and as part of the process, they would make changes as my illustration process went along. They would make changes that took me additional work to do. They would move around kitchens and baths and windows and stuff like this. And they were a great client, and I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life and still working a full-time job, but that's another story. The creative director, she was very, very nice to me. And one day I was in meeting with the art directors and she said, "Richard, on your way out, can you poke your head into my office?" So on the way out, I did. She invited me in and she sat me down and she said, "Look, we love working with you. I review all your invoices, and I know that my art directors make changes in the natural process of doing work with you. So we're asking you to do more work and move things around, et cetera, et cetera. I know that's taking you time, but when I review your invoices, I never see a charge for this. You never seem to charge us for any of the revision work that we ask you to do. Why is that?" So I kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit and I said, "Well, you know, you're my biggest client. I love working with you guys, and I do it just as kind of a favor to keep things simple. I just absorb the cost." And she looked at me right in the eye and she said, "You've got to stop doing that," which kind of took me back a little bit. And she said, "You know, we work with illustrators, web designers, lots of creative talent. And when we ask them in the natural course of a project to do additional work that they have not estimated in the original scope of work, they charge us additional. They're professionals. We expect that from professionals, and we also expect that from you. It makes you look more professional. So please, moving forward, if we're asking you to do extra work, put something reasonable in there that covers your additional time and cost in doing that additional work." Well, I walked out of that brief meeting, and that did completely change my attitude about this moving forward. And I realized I wasn't working for family members. I was a professional. She was telling me, "You're a professional, and you do need to charge for your work." I encourage you to do the same. So let's just develop a simple example of what might happen in a scenario. Let's say you're doing an illustration for products, food products, like some kind of treat on a stick, frozen in a box in the frozen food section. Working for an ad agency marketing group, and what they've asked you to do is to illustrate a penguin for the product. They want to appeal to kids, and so you're doing a really cute penguin. Everything's going great. Now, the creative director gives you a call and says, "We just had a meeting, we love your latest proof, and we noticed that the way the penguin is turned a little bit, there's enough room on the penguin's chest that maybe we could put the company logo kind of in a shield, almost like this is a super penguin." Well, it's a good idea, and you could definitely do it, but it will take you more time. There was no notion of doing this when you originally estimated the job. So what do you do in this case? Well, in some cases, we're kind of home free because the client will say something like, "We know this will take some additional cost. Can you put together an estimate and send it over?" Or, and this one is even better, but less common, the client will say, "We know this will take some additional work from your side. Just bill us for your time." I love that one because you don't even have to deal with an estimate. That's a really wonderful, reasonable client. But a lot of times clients will say nothing, and that leaves us in a little bit of an awkward position. What do we do? How do we charge them? We need to say something. And by the way, you don't do this at the end of the project. You do it when the client has come up with the change. And I've had many vendors that I've worked with in which might get an estimate for $3,000 to do a web design, and at the end of the project you get a bill for $4,200, and it's like, what is this? Well, you made all these changes and you knew nothing about them. That's not the way to do it. So the way to do it is to say something, either by email or on the phone. So if the client does not give you a cue, say you're talking on the phone, you're talking about this shield on the penguin's chest, you simply say, this will take some additional time, but I'll put together an estimate and get it over to you this afternoon. Shouldn't be too much, or whatever. And you can just follow up with that. You could do the same thing with email if the client is communicating with you by email. This is a little additional work, or this is some additional work over and above what I had originally estimated, so I will send you over an estimate this afternoon or tomorrow morning or whatever it might be. That's great. And by the way, as I always say, communication is at the heart of any business transaction, any business activity. And communication like this tends to reduce stress because the client knows what you're going to be charging them for, knows how you charge, knows that if they increase the scope of work, you are going to make some sort of charge. Now, at first this might be a little bit awkward. As I said in my story, it's something that I was nervous about doing at all for some period of time. But after a while you get the hang of it and you find out that, surprisingly, what I found is that very few clients will ever push back on this. They understand. Every once in a while you might get somebody that says, well, our budget's really tight, or, well, can you just absorb the cost? But I find it to be extremely rare. One thing else, when you do this estimate and you send it over by email, make a little bit of a description. Describe it. Adding shield with company name on chest of penguin, $350. Something like that, so that they know exactly what the change in the scope of work is. That will be good, especially if they have more changes later and you have to start sort of stacking these up. The other thing I like to do is I like to ask whether or not it is approved and you've been given a go-ahead. I generally don't go ahead unless I get some sort of email approval back or verbal approval back or text or something that says, yeah, this is good, this is reasonable, let's go for it. So one thing I frequently put at the bottom of this little estimate that I email over for the change in the scope of work is this, very casual. I just say, let me know if this is good to go. Very, very informal, works great. Client will email you back and say, yeah, this is fine. Let us know when you can get us an updated proof, something like that. So the next question, the final question that really comes up is, how much do you charge? And that really comes down to what your billing rate is and how much time it's going to take. So going back to the penguin example, if this takes another 2.5 hours and maybe you charge $100 an hour, then you should charge an additional $250 for that change. You have to kind of think about how much time it's going to take. Now, I will admit that not all of us have a sort of a set billing rate. If you're new to this, you might not really even know what you're charging per hour or what it works out to be. But I will say this, every project you do does have sort of a hidden billing rate, even if you're not kind of doing things by your dollar per hour, so to speak. So, as an example, if you have a project that you're doing for $500 and you think it's going to take you 10 hours to do it, and you kind of know that, it's going to be 8, 10, 11, 12, something like that, 10 hours you say, okay, you're billing out at $50 an hour. Every hour you work, you're making $50. 50 times 10 obviously is $500, and that's your project budget. So you can think of it in terms of that way if you're not really comfortable with this dollar per hour thing, which you should get comfortable with as you move forward. Many times you'll get this question where clients will say, what do you bill dollar per hour? You want to have an answer to that question rather than, oh, I don't know. That just doesn't go over so well. So that's been a successful way for me to estimate costs, and when I get an approval, I move ahead with the project, and I almost always do. So just to briefly sum up, number one, learn to spot when your client is asking for additional work, and don't be nervous about charging for it. Almost all clients understand if they're expanding your scope of work, they expect to be charged something appropriate additional. Also, let them know in writing how much additional the charge is going to be. That kind of communication is really, really important. One final thing, break it out separately on the bill. If your bill for the project was, say, $1,500, I put that up top, and then I have the change order, calling it a change order, that they have made. Estimate cost for adding shield to penguin's chest, $250, whatever we talked about. That keeps it separate, and the good thing about this is that sometimes clients will come back with additional changes. So you might have a project that started out and you have 3 sets of additional changes that they've asked for above and beyond the scope of work, and you can just put them one by one by one. So if you lump all that together, that's not so good, because clients will see that invoice email come in, they'll look and say, oh, that's a lot of money, maybe I should email, maybe I should question, maybe I should call, and then what do? I'm too busy today, I'll put it aside, I'll call tomorrow, which means I might forget about it, and then it delays your payment. So call that stuff out. That's very, very good for getting paid promptly and keeping the client informed. Looks very professional. Highly recommended. And by the way, easy to do. Just an invoice. So that pretty much sums up this episode. I hope this was useful. And if you do have some specific questions about this, leave it in the comments below. I would really like to answer those personally, because this is a really interesting topic. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that by doing this, by actually accurately billing for additional work, it can increase your income substantially. And that's a good thing, because you don't have to work as hard. Make more money for less time. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.